The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host, and we are delighted to have Roman, and I'm going to screw up his name, Buchberger. Did I say that right?
That's pretty good, yeah.
Oh, wow. Hey, nailed it.
You got it.
Roman is a law enforcement professional, and he is running for Lake County Sheriff. Roman, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Marcus, for having me.
Can you explain to our listeners what is your origin story and how did you get to where you are today? How did you ultimately decide to run for sheriff?
I grew up predominantly with mom and dad, brother, mostly out in Schaumburg. Dad had some heart problems, so he was actually that and this was his big problems, and he wound up being on disability when I was in 7th grade. Mom, unfortunately, also wound up contracting pancreatic cancer and was diagnosed in 8th grade, which meant that, unfortunately, my freshman year in high school, my mom passed away right after Christmas, my freshman year in high school, which left my brother and my dad and myself. My dad obviously couldn't work, so I went from high school and 4 sports to, by my sophomore year, I was 2 sports. And by after that, I was just playing summer ball that I had to pay for because I basically had to go to work because, like I said, my dad, he couldn't work. So I had to come home and do what I had to do for my dad and my brother. I ultimately wound up leaving and enlisting in the Army the first time and left for the Army. And I was with the 7th Infantry Division out of Monterey when it was still open. They've closed it since, but it was out there. Unfortunately, my dad wound up passing away just a little short of my first year of active duty. I came home, wound up actually at the age of 18 getting custody of my brother, and so I had to walk around with my custody papers as well as my parents' birth certificates because nobody could believe that an 18-year-old could have custody of his 13-year-old brother at the time, or 14-year-old. So, got that. They wound up transferring me out of the 7th Infantry Division, which was, like I said, an active duty unit, to active reserve out of the 75th out of Joliet, which is a training division. And somebody came up to me, now I'm 19, and says, hey, listen, what do you want to do? And I'll be honest, I had no idea. I never thought about law enforcement. I kind of wanted my freedom up until my dad passed. Basically, they said, hey, they got this thing called a CSO, a Community Service Officer, at the village of Schaumburg. Would you be interested in applying for it? So I did. I got the job. That's how I actually got started in law enforcement. I wound up leaving Schaumburg, I want to say 4 or 5 months, because they wound up having rotating shifts. So I'd be working midnights, which is kind of counterproductive to having my brother and having a base house. Went out to the village, the city of Crystal Lake, which will always have a soft spot for me. They were, at the time, much more of a family group, much more understanding of my situation, and I thrived greatly. They only had 2 shifts as a CSO at that time. So it was only days and afternoons, so it didn't negatively impact at home. They still allowed for me with my military. Ultimately, I wound up getting hired with the village of Lakewood in McHenry as a police officer. I was there for a few years. I did the normal stuff. I was an FTO, a firearms instructor, a juvenile officer. I was eventually assigned to the state police as North Central Narcotics. I was there for just under 2 years. Then I wound up getting promoted. So I got promoted to patrol supervisor, so they brought me back to my home office, and I was there, which was a blessing because although it taught me all the administrative work, all the budgetary stuff, it also taught me that I didn't like sitting in an office for 6 hours a day doing paperwork. I didn't like just sitting there kind of doing all the time cards, doing the reports, doing all of our budgetary spending and coding for everything. Ultimately, it did, during my time with the state police, introduce me to Lake County. That's how I ended up here. I knew the folks over here at Lake County from my time with the state police. Ultimately wind up putting in an application and being hired with Lake County in 2003. I was here relatively uneventfully. I had done a lot at my previous department. Wound up being deployed with one other deputy to Katrina. We were part of the team of first responders of the 150 Illinois responders that went to Katrina. We were down there for just, I believe, 3 weeks, right about that area. Came back. Was here for a little while, ultimately went back to school. I transferred into court security so I could go back to school at CLC, College of Lake County. Was there, wound up actually eventually coming back to the highway. And the reason I had to come transfer into court security is because I couldn't go to school at night and still work at the sheriff's office. So I needed to transfer to a division that was more shift appropriate. Kind of came back to the road. I was happy happy until about 14, where a division came up that was, the sheriff calls it a community services division, but it was not a community service officer like it was before. It was intended to be kind of like an open platform of, as the name would suggest, community service, proactive policing, not reactive. That at the time, our Undersheriff Ray Rose, who I will always be indentured to him, came to me and he's like, listen, you know your job, just don't get a suit, don't go over budget, and you can do whatever you need to do, which allowed me the opportunity to really expand on what we normally know as policing. Everybody knows the cops and the lights and the handcuffs, but it really allowed me an opportunity to kind of go, listen, we can get in front of a lot of these problems just being involved with things. Wound up in 18 was kind of like the sweetest year. I wound up getting the award from Beach Park School District for a character education program that I developed with actual educators, as well as also getting a Volunteer of the Year award from the Lake County Underage Drinking and Drug Underage Task Force. I was the one that was responsible for your drug disposal countywide, and it was even featured on Channel 2. I transferred back out the road the last year and a half before I wanted to retire, and I'll be honest, it was a situation where I really didn't have too much left to prove. I was happy to do it, and I retired in 22, and I will not lie, Marcus, I was happy to be John Q. Citizen again. That being said, the past few years have been rough. I have listened to politicians alike, whether they had a connection to the services or whatever, both military as well as public service, completely bastardize the professions just for votes. Nobody speaks on behalf with law enforcement and have a actual sit-down conversation. They're basically told this is what's going to happen, deal with it. So I've watched my office, my profession, and my military all get bastardized simply for political clout. Their mental health wasn't there. The assistance wasn't there. Recruitment wasn't there. And people weren't talking to these groups saying, how do we work together? They were talking at them. In all that, I kind of left out the fact that I did re-enlist in 04 with 814th Combat Military Police in Arlington Heights from 04 to 08 as well, before I got out and stayed out in 08. And my frustration, my candidacy here is out of frustration of something has to be done differently and better, a little more systematically, a little more in collaboration with the community we're supposed to serve. And it has to happen that way, otherwise we're going to continue to fall short.
Roman, you just gave me a ton to unpack, which is great. First of all, I totally understand that it happened many, many years ago, but I want to offer my condolences on your parents. I had a similar experience, although I was about 3 years older than you. So, you were at the time. So I totally understand what it's like to grow up overnight and have to take on responsibility. I never took custody of my younger sister, but just for the listeners, if this gives you any indication of the type of person who's running for office, holy cow, what a good heart. And it's kind of funny, I'm not going to ask you this, but I was going to ask you, how did your experience in multiple departments enrich your outlook? And you named it. One of the two questions, unscripted, is, did you go to Staff and Command?
I did not.
Okay.
I left my department at Lakewood as a command officer to come to Lake County before I went, which, I'll be honest, because of the size of the department, we didn't have the same long command structure like we have at some other departments. So when you were a patrol supervisor, you were essentially a deputy chief.
Right.
The only two things that I didn't do is I didn't do salaries and I didn't supervise investigations. And I'm not going to lie, Marcus, I realized that I wanted to still be more hands-on than sitting at the office.
I don't blame you.
If they would have sent me, if I would have stayed there long enough, I got a feeling I probably wouldn't have been as content as I was with the decision to move like I was.
Trust. We are trusted and established in teaching others to protect themselves from physical harm. What if we could also protect your wallet? At Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic programs, safety isn't only about strength. It's about smart choices and peace of mind. With decades of public safety experience, from law enforcement and firefighting to stress resilience coaching, Marcus equips you to stay calm, confident, and in control, no matter the pressure. And now, with our new partnership with Think Energy Plus, we're giving you a chance to protect what matters most, your budget, by switching to cleaner, fixed-rate electric energy and soon-to-be gas. With personalized savings, you're investing in both your safety and your savings. And with AutoSave, you are automatically switched to the lowest energy rate. Whether you are guarding your personal safety or safeguarding your finances, Marcus Melnick and Think Energy Plus are your trusted allies. Discover how to stay safe and save by visiting thinkenergy.plus/Marcus Melnick. That's thinkenergy.plus/Marcus Melnick. After you visit, send your electric bill for a free rate analysis to marcus@firearmmentor.com. Smart protection for your body and your wallet. Well, when you went down south for Hurricane Katrina relief, what was your role there? What exactly did you do?
It changed. So when we first got there, we were sworn in as a special agent, that's the term that they used, with the Louisiana State Police, with the governor that gave us police authority. And at first, when we first got deployed, what the military folks will know as your FOB, our jump-off point was in Hammond, Louisiana. We were actually staying at one of the college campuses there, and that was our rally point as far as getting together. Originally, it was for emergency response and crime prevention. So the first few, I want to say week and a half, we were actually there to help kind of curb some of the unrest that had happened within the city. The uniqueness about Katrina was, for those that are familiar with New Orleans, it's under the water table and it rolls. It's not a flat land. So one of the issues they had with rescues and police responses was that one section you'd have water, and 300 yards in front of you, you'd see a road come up out of the water. So now you need a vehicle to traverse the road. But on the other side of that road, you'd have more water. So you needed both. You needed both aquatic as well as land nav, and that was something that they didn't have a lot of originally. So when we first got there, it was as needed. So we literally were in boats down there. The claim to fame, which I'm not laughing because I did it, I'm laughing because of the ribbing I got afterwards, is I actually did partially damage one of the county Zodiacs because we were in some of the flooded areas, and because the water, I don't know if people know this or not, the water down there, because of some of the chemicals that they do down there as far as petroleum base and such, was very hard to see, and we actually wound up catching the Zodiac on a fence line, and it actually ruptured the boat. We salvaged the boat, we made it into port, but not without some damage. There's actually some pictures of it that we put online as well, that, again, was tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. So the first week and a half was going out there, providing police services and providing rescue and trying to keep the peace. That eventually transitioned to just search and rescue, following up on 911 that literally, I hate to say this, had been holding for literally 2 weeks. People who had called 911, they had lost contact, and no one had been able to reach them. Sometimes that was literally getting families out of areas that couldn't remove themselves. And unfortunately, a couple of them meant finding people that had unfortunately passed away that didn't have any other help prior to us getting there. And then the last week and a half, we were entrenched with the state police entirely, supporting removal and cleanup operations as they were kind of fixing the levees and kind of getting everything kind of back to normal before we came home.
Very interesting. So at the time of Katrina, I was working for Glencoe Public Safety, and we sent down 4 people, I think, from a 30-person department. So percentage-wise, that's a lot. And I know our chief originally was certified as a SWAT officer, so he did security with NIPUS for infrastructure restoration, and then the rest of the people were on the fire side. It's really interesting how when you said, hey, I'm basically a deputy chief, that's kind of what I did. I stepped up to the plate, and I was like, whatever you need me to do, scheduling. And I was a civilian. And as you know, sworn people don't like civilians telling them what to do or scheduling them or anything. But I had the management experience to help. So I was able to step up a little bit. Obviously not in anything that would require a sworn officer to do. So I'm not doing patrol or anything like that. But on the back end, the stuff that the one deputy chief and the chief were deployed, I was like, well, tell me what you want me to do, I'll help. And it was the stuff you didn't like to do in the background.
Yeah, I understand that. Yes.
Yes. So it sounds like the responders needed some of the Wisconsin ducks.
So, funny story. And this is part of this gets way offline about me and more of an understanding what happened down there. The problem that made Katrina so unique wasn't just the storm, and it was the fact that, unfortunately at the time, funds had been misappropriated that was supposed to repair the levees that had been put into the convention center. So when that all happened, we originally got down there, and I'm not going to lie, I'm going to give a shout out to our conservation folks. Our conservation folks got down there and were in the water same day that they were in town. And unfortunately, we're told that they had to remove themselves and leave the area because they were an outside police agency and did not have the authority to be there. It was because there was a power struggle happening within the internal city government as well as the state government when it came to ILEAS. That's the group that was ultimately activated to come down there. And so you had a lot, as the water receded, you had a lot of your deuce and a halves, your big trucks that actually had a snorkeling system to get them well elevated. Oh. There were ducks that were down there, but unfortunately they weren't as reliable as you would think. They were too big to go through the city in some places. And I actually will have a couple of, on our webpage, you'll see photos of that stuff as far as, our Facebook page, of when we were actually on the trucks moving through the city to get to those other areas. But when we got there, like I said, the biggest problem was that our conservation guys, who all came down there with boats, they went down there, they hit the ground running, and unfortunately by the city were told to leave before the governor came in and said, no, this is us, we're telling you go. And by the third day, we were actually fully entrenched and activated within downtown New Orleans.
Okay, and I guess that type of incident's relatively unprecedented, so there wasn't, it's kind of like the pandemic. No one knew what to do, and it kind of got figured out. But it really amazes me and pisses me off when you have a real societal problem and two political talking heads duking it out. For example, and we're not going to get into the do you support, do you not support, but the whole thing with troops going into cities. The trouble is the politics are in the way of personal safety, and you just gave an example. So that's my opinion. I'm not going to go into that because it's polarizing. But I would like to ask you, what are the pillars of a good police department?
So if you read literature, and it goes all the way back to Peel, who is the father of modern law enforcement. I'm not going to lie. I have my own take on it, and people can put things into place. We all know the actual law enforcement, so crime and punishment, there has to be a penalty. In America, as an adult, there's really only two ways to penalize somebody. It either is incarceration or fines. That very much limits the, kind of how you have to pick what impacts or gets the most compliance from your community. Everyone knows that. That's what's on TV. That's what's in movies, and everybody, yeah. But there's a whole other caveat to this. And this is something that like I said, this goes back to the Ray Rose, where he gave me the freedom to really expand this and not just get stuck into one lane. In order for a police department will always reflect your communities. So it doesn't matter where you're at. If your community has a lot of traffic problems, then you predominantly are going to have a lot of traffic units that are there to suppress and enforce traffic laws. If you have a lot of gang violence or drug violence, you're going to have a lot of TAC units. If you have white-collar crime, then you're going to have a lot of detectives and investigators. So if you really want to see the base of your community, go to your local police department and just look at how they prioritize their resources, and it'll give you kind of a baseline of what that community needs or what its wants are the most. The reason why I bring that up is because there's three other facets besides just the enforcement part. There's communication, participation, and education. You kind of just touched a base on something. The education part, we do not have very good across the board. I'm not saying individual departments, but as a profession, we don't do a very good job educating the masses as far as what our limitations are, whether it's in office or your laws that are being passed and what restrictions we may have on us. The sheriff's office has a unique dynamic as far as how it does its staffing and how it does its patrolling, not better or worse, just unique. And going out to people and trying to kind of talk to them, to give them a platform and say, listen, this is how the sheriff's office functions. It's very interesting for people to realize that the sheriff's office, all sheriff's offices are traditionally non-traditional. In other words, they don't just have a set area. Their areas come and go. They have certain responsibilities like the courthouse and the jail that other police departments don't have. And the uniqueness, and yet here we are still ingrained within your communities. So you need that education. I need to be able to go and sit there, listen, this is where we're at. This is our no policies. This is what we know about A, B, and C. The communication is something that everybody talks about, and they do. Local communities try this very hard, but we do need it on a bigger scale. We have to be able to communicate with our public. Pre-COVID numbers, the public outnumbered us approximately 550 to 1 nationwide, citizens to police officers. 550 to 1, and that was pre-COVID numbers. That I know that number's gone up, but I don't know what the most recent numbers are. That means that I have to work with my communities to be successful. I have to. I have to know what your values are. I have to know what your priorities are. And we have to work together because you have to have a level of trust in me. Otherwise, we absolutely are going to be pulling in different directions. And the participation, which is really the easiest part, is just showing up. And I don't mean just at the block parties. I mean, I have been, as I've started this whole campaigning thing, I've been going to people and asking them about what the sheriff's office does now as opposed to what they did when I was there. And I'm shocked to find out that most communities, whether they directly are serviced by the sheriff's office or not, don't have regular public safety meetings. Public safety meetings aren't supposed to be when something's bad. They're literally supposed to be a sit-down where the community can come out, talk with their deputies or police officers, just get to see them as people. Instead of just a car number and a nameplate, you know who they are, you know you have questions. If nothing's going on, great. Then it's just a nice conversation between human beings so that we can work together for our communities. If you have something going on, you have a direct face-to-face interaction, not an email, not a text, not a phone message. And you're supposed to have those about twice a year. It doesn't have to be at a big thing, but you're just supposed to have the public have it available to you. And I'm shocked at how many people don't anymore. If they're not online and they're not checking a web page or checking out a Facebook post, they're not getting that same interaction anymore. In my opinion, we all know the law enforcement, you need that part, we get that, but you need the other three if you're genuinely going to try to make an improvement from what you have right now. And I think that big picture, not local, I know some smaller departments really try this, but big picture, I think we're failing at that as law enforcement as a whole.
So there's a lot of opportunity for growth, which is great. That's the positive statement that I'm twisting to make it positive. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of potential change. And speaking of education, one of my listeners know I am an educator. I'm a safety educator. And you made reference, you did it really quick, but I want to expand and explain this to the listeners. So please bear with me. You talked about Peel being the father of law enforcement. And just so the listeners know, Sir Robert Peel in England was the original, or he's attributed to organizing law enforcement in cities. That's why police officers in London are called bobbies. It is after Robert, Bob and Robert, that one's a nickname. So just to let the listeners know. Because you know that, your criminal justice background, I know that, I have a criminal justice background, but the regular listener may not get that reference. So that's why I wanted to just kind of deconstruct it. Can you talk about pathways to redemption?
So this is something that we had talked about before as far as, I believe we were talking about as far as our inmate population, correct?
Yes.
So right now, a lot of communities have programs that are intended to reduce or limit recidivism, which is great. I will walk that line with you, and I'll be one of your loudest rabble-rousers when it comes to we don't want mass incarceration. So it has to start with a couple of different levels. Unfortunately, statistically speaking, most people do not have one offense and that's all. And we have to ask ourselves, well, why? What's the situation that has this person, even after they've been justice impacted, which is the term that they use now for people who are, going through a situation in the state. Why? What is their situation that gets to this? In my opinion, you have that participation thing I talked about before. We do have specialty courts in Lake County. We do have mental health court, drug court, veterans court, but I don't think they go far enough. If you look at some of the other models in DuPage and in Kane County, they don't just get you into a program, get you educated, and then turn you loose. They continue to support you, and that's the big one, support. It doesn't take a lot of money to actually have people that are available to continue that support structure. When these people who are genuinely trying to kind of drive that straight line, they need a support group. If family is great, but understand they might not have a family that is that supportive, and unfortunately might be surrounded by people who claim to be their friends that don't want them to succeed. There's a phrase, misery loves company for a reason. And so getting back to that, working with employers, literally setting up a standard and say, listen, if we have this person, this guy or girl, and they are in our system right now, and they can do A, B, and C, would you as an employer, if you work with the state's attorney's office, I'm speaking on their behalf, I like to think they would be, but I've not discussed this with them, but definitely work with the sheriff's office to help these folks that, we're going to help you not just get you out and get you an opportunity, but literally set you up with a place of employment, try to work with our transportation authorities to get you transportation reasonably, and possibly even working with our housing authorities so that you have an environment that allows you a genuine clean slate, and stop putting people right back into the same environments that caused them to have these struggles to begin with. But that means working through them. One of the things that I learned again that when I was working for the Community Services Division, people who don't know will do they won't go out and think outside the box sometimes. Whether it be pride or intimidation, or they just don't know, they tend to just stick within their lane of what they know, a comfort level. You need to be able to sit them down and go, listen, I can help you. I can't make you do it, but this is what you need to do. I can put you in contact with A, B, and C, and then you guys can go from there. And when you hit a snag or a roadblock, reach out to me, talk to me. We do that a little bit when our adult probation. Only problem is that only works when you're in adult probation. We need to continue this and make it available beyond that to help these folks realize, listen, what got you into trouble the first time is not your only option, and we're going to walk that line with you to help you realize that.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.